This is Look West, a podcast from California's Assembly Democrats.
Hi and welcome everyone. My name is Maria Nider and you're here listening to Look West. I'm here with my colleague and the producer of this episode, Jen Hardy. Hi, Jen.
Hey.
You took the time in those last few weeks to go through some interviews to talk about a specific bill in this case that has taken action here in California that affects lots of people, lots of communities, and that often some of the issues that are so very specific to certain communities go underseen. But as we explored into the situation, I feel that at the very least for me, I've learned that so many more folks than what I expected are actually affected by all of this.
Yeah, so I got the chance to talk to Assemblymember Chiu, who authored this bill, and the bill was about being able to conceive a baby when you just don't have the innate ability to do so. And that can happen because you're LGBTQ+, it can happen because of infertility, or you don't have a romantic partner. And infertility can be caused by an insane number of different things. So it's an interesting, it was interesting legislation when it was passed. It's still interesting because even though this passed 6 years ago, it still leads the nation in setting parental rights for folks.
Assemblymember Chiu is not the only guest that you had for this episode. You also had someone who has been directly affected by this issue. Can you tell us about your guest?
Definitely. Mary Hernandez spoke with us, and she has 2 children, and she and her wife were able to create those children using donor sperm. And it was very inspirational to hear her story and everything she's gone through from never expecting to be able to have children as a woman who loved women to the point of being in this committed marriage with her wife, and her wife carrying 2 boys for them. And it was very emotional and amazing to be able to talk to her about her story and what hope that can give other couples who are facing this issue.
Well, Jen, I'm really excited to hear everything that was shared for this episode, and I can't wait to hear the story from Mary, of course. But let's get started with hearing what Mr. Chiu, Assemblymember Chiu, shared with us.
As you know, we're here to talk about Assembly Bill 960, which you authored a few years back, and wondering if you can just share with us what this bill did.
Sure. Well, what we were trying to address was to ensure that all families, all parents are treated equally under the law. The fact of the matter is many parents, but particularly LGBTQ parents, use assisted reproduction to conceive. And some folks can afford to go through this process with the help of a doctor or sperm bank, but that can be very expensive. And many parents, gay and straight, use home insemination to conceive because they can't afford to use a sperm bank or the doctor. But prior to this bill passing, the parental rights of parents who utilized home insemination were in question. The sperm donor could have been given parental rights, or in some cases could have even been forced to pay child support when the donor was never to be the intended parent. And I also mentioned that before our law, California law was completely silent on egg donors. The purpose of the bill was very simple: to clarify that intended parents are the legal parents and donors are donors.
Great. And I know the intent was pretty simple, and that the actual law itself had a lot of complicated things in it that actually make it simple, with a lot of contracts and everything, and that a lot of parents now appreciate that. So what made you want to be the author of this bill?
Well, part of it, at the time I was working on the law, I was actually in the midst of starting my own family. In fact, my son was born just a few months after the law went into effect. And when it was shared with me all the trials and tribulations that some couples have had to go through, I couldn't imagine going through that experience. I couldn't imagine having to fight in court to establish my parental rights on top of being a new parent. The fact is there was ambiguity in the law that placed many couples, particularly lesbian, gay, transgender couples, in these truly heartbreaking legal battles to establish their parental rights. And that just did not sit right with me.
And how does it feel knowing that you've simplified that process for them, and that, probably donors are probably more comfortable donating because they're not going to be held liable for child support. So more people are able to create the families that they've always envisioned.
At the time, it was complicated to fix these different ambiguities in the law, but in hindsight, it is very simple. As you said, we're really just trying to make it very clear that a donor is a donor, that parents are the legal parents, to avoid these heartbreaking legal fights that folks shouldn't go through, particularly when you're becoming a parent. And this is, it was wonderful to pass a law. It's good to know that we're having an impact, trying to make life easier and to make sure that all families, all parents, regardless of your background, are treated equally under the law.
Do you think California is still a leader in LGBTQ rights in general, and this area specifically as well?
Absolutely. We are still in dark times when it comes to so many of our rights that oftentimes in California we take for granted. But just this past year, there were 34 states that introduced over 100 laws targeting our transgender community, particularly targeting transgender kids. And this is 2021. And in California, our legislature just voted to pass 2 bills that I have that address different aspects of basic rights for all folks, but particularly for our transgender community members. And this shouldn't be the case, but the fact of the matter is California has led the way. We've continued to lead the way. We started the fight with the fight for marriage equality, and we're going to keep leading that fight until someday everyone has true equality. And regardless of your sexual orientation, your gender identity, you're treated just like everyone else.
Thank you very much for being a part of that fight and for talking with us today. In addition to Assemblymember Chiu, I had the opportunity to speak to Mary Hernandez, and we were able to talk about how she and her wife were able to create a family of their own. I'll start off with a really easy question. Can you just share your name with us?
Sure, Mary Hernandez.
Great. And I'm curious, how did you meet your wife?
How did I meet my wife? Well, it was actually in a bar. And it was, in 2011, I was really interested in learning more about her. And it just, evoked those types of feelings between two people that is unique.
Can you tell us a little bit about your family?
Sure. Ashley is a physical therapist, and she just recently went back to work, not from the pandemic issues, but she had hip surgeries. She's had a couple of them. So now she's back at work on light duty. We have 2 boys, Bodie Franklin, he is 4, and Cameron Titus, and he is 2. They are incredible young men who are really learning their own voices right now at 2 and 4 and asserting them, which is good, challenging sometimes, but it's good. But they're kind, sweet, and sassy. And I think that's the right recipe for young kids who are about that age.
Did you always realize that you as 2 women in love could create a family of your own with children of your own? And if not, how did that change over time?
That's an interesting question, because my wife and I are about 17, 18 years apart. So because of the, generational differences, I think we both had pictures of what we could do personally, and what we could achieve. Being born in 1967, there were not a lot of, it didn't feel like a lot of safe spaces to be able to explore yourself. So I spent a good part of my 20s, kind of figure out my own personal life. And so what that did is it had me focus on my professional life, my academics and my career instead of my personal life. I can't speak for Ashley, but she was born in 1985. And I think that, while she grew up in the Midwest and I grew up down in San Diego, I think that, she, had her own experiences growing up and, what she felt like she could envision marriage and kids and all those things. Whereas I really didn't allow myself to dream,
Yeah.
because that was not the norm, back in the 70s and the 80s. And so, it wasn't until I moved here to Sacramento, where I saw people, people like Laurie McBride who were gay and out and successful, that it made me start thinking, maybe I can feel comfortable. Maybe I can explore this part of me.
When did you realize then that you could not only be out and successful, but also, thrive and have a family, create children of your own, that kind of thing?
Well, it was, again, when I moved to Sacramento in 1999, if you remember, right around that time, the Night Initiative was, on the ballot in 2000. It was the statutory definition of marriage that was ran. And when I moved here, I was always involved in, in politics and in helping people find their own voices and expressing my own. It got me to recognize that, that there were everyday people who felt comfortable and that were accepted, right? And that were professional. And that group of friends, fast forward a couple of years, we lost, Prop 22 and, then the whole, court, lawsuits ensued and, which led to, Prop 8 and all the other things, or the overturning of Prop 22 and then to, Proposition 8. But that core group of people started, of course, coupling up, started creating their own families. And back then we called it the Gaby boom. There were a number of my friends and acquaintances who began to have and plan and then have kids. And it made me think, for the first time, I want that. I want that too. So this had to have been somewhere around 2003, 2004. And that's when, because I never, like I had mentioned before, thought of motherhood in a serious way, because I think inside, there was this deep-seated feeling that I wasn't allowed to have that.
Can you share with us the journey of conceiving your children? And obviously, as much as you're comfortable with sharing what that was like for you as a family. I know different couples go about non-traditional parenthood and conception different ways, and just your journey.
Well, I'll talk about whatever you want me to talk about, Jen, because I believe in sharing, your experience and hopefully it'll invoke in something inside of others to be able to think about like, what does this mean to them, and what do they feel and what do they want? But it was a lot more, there were a lot more decision points than I had thought of planning a family, right? Because like, we can't, just say, oh my gosh, we're pregnant, right? But there has to be a decision points about how are we going to do the donor sperm? Is it going to be known or unknown? What is the ethnicity going to be like? Because my wife is Caucasian and I am mixed race, and I being the non-biological, I'm not the one that was going to carry the baby. We talked about how do we ensure that, our kid or child represents the both of us. And so, my father is Mexican, my mother is Japanese. And so, because, you could go out and find donor sperm, I thought, oh, let's go find a Mexican Japanese baby. I think the closest we got to Mexican Japanese was German Chinese. And so, there came a point in time where we realized we didn't have the types of options that we thought we were going to have because of a lot of different concerns, right? We wanted to use an organization in California because we felt that the laws around how sperm banks operate were something that we trusted. At one point, we did find a Mexican Japanese donor, but they were in a different state. And I didn't know how that state regulated those things. So I just, frankly, I'm not even sure of the laws in California that regulate, the sperm banks. But, I just assumed that, if we were going to find donor sperm, that we wanted to use California, sperm bank. And then, so like I said, I can understand how people go into the journey and then find themselves, without children because of the fact that there were so many different decision points. There wasn't like a central hub where we could find all the answers to the questions that we had for all the different things that, we had to think about, right? And so, but my wife, because she's a very good cyber researcher, found a lot of the answers through the Gay and Lesbian Center, and other places like that. But she had to pull them together to help us with that, So that was, it was a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. And then, we had to, as a couple, figure out what were we looking for, right? In terms of personality, in terms of, ethnicity and physical makeup and all that other stuff. And so in the end, I do believe we made the perfect choice because we have the perfect children. And it was interesting because my wife got pregnant the first time, both times, which was incredible. We did try and have a third child. And the shocking thing was after 5 tries, we didn't get pregnant, and there's no more donor sperm from from this donor. So we decided that our family was going to remain, a family of 4, and that we were so blessed with the 2 boys that we have.
So you were able to use the same donor for both of your children?
Yeah. We purchased 5 vials, thinking that we were going to get 10, like we get 5 now because it's expensive, right? 5 now, we'll get 5 later. There's a ton of it, but then one day you look on the website and it's all gone, and you're like, oh my God, we only have 5. Gosh, I hope it's enough, and it was like it was meant to be.
Wow. Can you share for anyone who may not know what IUI means? I know just researching this episode that there are an insane number of acronyms used when people are trying to conceive, especially when they're doing it non-traditionally.
Yeah, what does IUI stand for? I probably knew it when we were in it, but it's just the insemination process that they have. It's a simple procedure, right? That the doctor inserts the tube and then they inject the sperm directly into her uterus.
I know some others use IVF, some do just an at-home insemination. They don't even go to a doctor's office. How did you choose which one to do?
Well, we started, as we were exploring, pregnancy and fertility, we started with the fertility unit at Kaiser because we were covered under Kaiser. And if I can just say that we are, again, incredibly grateful for the healthcare that we have because it provided the full range of services that were, nearly all covered, from fertility to, the prenatal care to childbirth and beyond, right? It was something to where my wife's brother, who lives in Wisconsin, I think it cost him $10,000-$15,000 to have each of his kids, and it wasn't nearly like that. The most expensive thing, of course, for us was the purchase of the donor sperm. That was the expense, the big expense we had. Like, there were fertility drugs and things like that we had to use, but it was nothing like what her brother had to go through financially.
So you mentioned a little bit that you wanted to use a California bank because you knew California's laws were better than laws in other states, even if you didn't know exactly what those were. I guess that's kind of the blessing of being in California, is you don't have to necessarily know them because they're so protective. Did you have to do anything beyond what's automatic in California to make sure your rights are protected? Like, say, if you travel out of state or internationally, any of that?
Yeah, we did. We did. I adopted my own kids. That's hard to say, you know, that I have to. First of all, those boys are mine, right? You know, we were there I was there in the beginning, just like any parent is, you know, any spouse. And I was there for the birth. I was loving them before they even came out of the womb. And the fact that I had to adopt my own kids was hard, but it's something that we chose to do. You know, not everybody does, because California laws are, you know, they look after, I think, you know, all families. And but, you know, it's just one of those things where we both did it in order to, we went through the adoption process in order to secure my rights, to ensure that nothing could ever interfere with that. And it was not an easy process. It is just a long process. It's very intimidating. And, you know, it's really an emotional thing as well. The fact that, you know, I have to go through an adoption process to adopt my own kids. You know, I'm in a marriage, and you know, it was just one of those things where it was an emotional struggle for me. But yes, I went through the court process to adopt them.
Very glad you were able to successfully get through that, and that you have full legal claim to your kiddos. That's great. So, you know, you're in this position of having gone through this more than once. What advice would you give other individuals or couples who want to conceive a child in a non-traditional manner?
What advice would I give? I would say, you know, stay focused with each other and what you're trying to do. You know, every couple have, you know, their own journey to go through, have their own questions, have their own things that they envision in terms of, you know, their family as they want to create it. The kids are not biologically connected to me, but I think the way that we are connected is much deeper than that. Look past that, right? Because not everybody is going to be able to be biologically connected to your kids in a, you know, non-traditional family like ours, or and that's okay. But just stay connected with each other to ensure that the family you're creating is truly your family, right? Yours as in the plural, and everything will just, you know, fall into place. One of the, I think the things that we think about as well is that we can't just live anywhere. You know, I want our boys to grow up in where they feel, you know, safe, and that they're not going to be, you know, I know kids when they grow up, like, you know, kids will go through some challenges, right, from their friends, and, you know, whether you're too tall or too skinny, or, you know, I just don't want them to ever feel like having two moms is going to be some type of you know, opportunity to be harassed, right? And I feel like in California there are a lot of families like ours, and they'll be able to see other families like ours and know that families come in different shapes, sizes, and also our healthcare system is, I think, pretty incredible. I had mentioned earlier my wife's brother and the challenges he had, you know, financially in Wisconsin, and our experience was much different.
In addition to that, were there any resources that maybe were more difficult to find that you had to kind of go below the surface that can maybe save some trouble and throw out there?
I think the Gay and Lesbian Center had some, I think from San Francisco, had some good legal advice in terms of the adoption process. I think, and remember, it changes over time. So by the time that I went to go adopt, my kids, the paperwork from my friends, was no longer 100% accurate. You got to do all of it, right? You've got to talk to friends who've been through it. You've got to look for all the legal aid advice that you can through various, places, and do your research like that. I think just do your research.
Is there, leave it a really wide open question, anything else that you want to share about your journey, about journey others may face, about the value of raising your family in California?
Well, I guess, I don't know that there's anything more to share, but I do want to reiterate, communication is like key, right? Stepping back when you're kind of, when you're kind of like in a moment of, I don't know, difficulty and you're arguing or, or over something, just to step back and to breathe and to communicate and remember what it is that you're doing with your, with your spouse or partner, or wife or husband, because it is a big step and there are going to be challenges. So if you can just remember to stay connected with your spouse and be able to kind of sometimes step back and breathe a little bit. Communication, if you can model that for your kids and your family, and just for yourselves as a couple, just stay focused on what it is that you're trying to do.
We really appreciate you sharing your story. It's not easy to do things non-traditionally, but definitely can give others hope.
Thank you, Jen, for this great episode, and to Assemblymember Chiu and Mary Hernandez for joining us in this conversation. Thank you to the Look West team and to our listeners. Until next time. The Look West podcast is produced by California Assembly Democrats. When you think of Californian politics, remember to look west.